Imagine this. Listener, somewhere beyond the orbit of Mercury, a traveller of stone and metal brushed against the fire of the sun and survived. For 72 hours, every instrument on Earth watched its light falter, then vanish, then return. Changed. Its reflection darkened its spectrum, bent toward iron and nickel, and something else unclassified, unknown. Some say it merely endured the heat. But what if in that brief moment of silence, it absorbed part of the sun itself, a pulse of plasma equal to the energy of 1 trillion atomic bombs? What are the odds that a wandering fragment could feed from a star and live to drift again? Stay with me. Let's drift a little deeper. In the last 72 hours of its passage by the sun, something impossible occurred. An interstellar fragment known as 3 Atlas. A traveller of rock and metal from beyond our solar system moved through the burning edge of the sun's corona and emerged intact. It should not have survived. The temperature near perihelion exceeds anything known to sustain solid matter. Even spacecraft shields designed by human hands would have disintegrated. But 3I Atlas did not break, did not evaporate, and did not vanish into light. Instead, when it came back into view, it was different, heavier, darker, and inexplicably calm. Telescopes around the world recorded the change with growing disbelief. Before perihelion, the object had reflected sunlight like any cold metallic body. Afterward, its brightness had dropped by half. Its spectral lines, once dominated by frozen gases, were now filled with the signatures of iron, nickel and chromium, the fingerprints of high-temperature metals. In some bands there appeared an unclassified line, faint and strange, as though something new had been forged within. It was as if the sun had reshaped it from the inside out. At first, analysts suspected error, instrument interference, glare, distortion, data compression. But every observatory from Chile to Japan confirmed the same readings. The phenomenon was real. When plotted against its orbital curve, the object's spin had slowed by almost 9%, a subtle but measurable change implying that energy or perhaps even mass had been added. In the void, between observation and explanation, a single phrase began to circulate among researchers: energy transfer. Normally, a body passing that close to the sun loses mass through outgassing or fragmentation. Yet 3I Atlas behaved in reverse. Its density increased, its internal temperature rose and then steadied instead of spiking. Its reflected light grew faint while its infrared emissions deepened. For reasons no one could fully describe, it seemed to be absorbing the solar energy rather than radiating it away. For a brief period, the Parker Solar Probe detected an anomaly near the object's trajectory, a loop of plasma stretching outward from the sun's corona arcing toward 3I Atlas like a magnetic bridge. It lasted 6 minutes before fading into silence. When it disappeared, the object's energy reading shifted sharply. It was as though a pulse had passed between them, a transfer of plasma light, or something subtler still. The researchers reviewing the footage did not speak at first. They only stared at the data as the realization sank in. The sun had reached toward it, and it had taken something in. The story that unfolded over the following days blurred the boundaries between geology and engineering. Infrared readings from the solar and heliospheric observatory showed that heat did not radiate evenly from its surface. Instead, it moved inward, drawn beneath the crust, redistributed through invisible channels, and released in smooth, rhythmic intervals. The pattern was so precise that one physicist described it as thermal pacing, a deliberate control of energy rather than random dissipation. The outer layer, once reflective, now behaved like a metallic glass, dense and non-reflective, able to absorb light without cracking under expansion. In every simulation, the same conclusion emerged. 3I Atlas had transformed its surface into a shell capable of retaining radiation. The most straightforward model suggested that solar plasma had briefly melted its crust, then solidified into a uniform alloy, a self-sealing process, known in theoretical material science as coating by capture. This shell would explain both its darkened tone and its new symmetry, but it also implied something more complex: the ability to manage heat from within. By Every 90 minutes, small hotspots migrated across the surface, appearing and fading in precise intervals. Each movement matched a faint pulse in the surrounding magnetic field. The synchronization between heat and magnetism was exact, as if the object's internal systems were using one to regulate the other. To describe this correlation, the European Space Agency introduced a new phrase, stellar metabolism. For the first time, the language of life entered the discussion of a lifeless body. Radar beams sent toward the object revealed another impossibility. The signals did not scatter or echo as they would from stone or metal. They vanished. Every wave that touched it simply ended, absorbed entirely without reflection. The phenomenon was soon called structural silence, a behaviour seen only in engineered metamaterials designed to cancel incoming energy. The deeper the scans, the quieter the returns. It was as if the object's structure had been reorganised at a molecular level to suppress all resonance to erase its presence from the universe's noise. When it passed beyond the sun's interference, its magnetic readings continued to oscillate, steady, rhythmic, deliberate. Some scientists suggested that it was a natural relic formed in a region of space dense with plasma and heavy metals. Others argued that nature could not produce such order. They pointed to the precision of its energy cycles, its perfect thermal symmetry, its absence of chaos. To them it behaved less like a comet, and more like a system, a mechanism built to endure, to collect, perhaps even to learn. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one engineer wrote privately, "It does not resist the sun. It collaborates with it." The phrase spread quietly among researchers. They began to see the pattern not as survival, but as harmony. The object was not fighting radiation. It was using it, converting entropy into equilibrium. Every pulse of plasma, every magnetic fluctuation, every quiet adjustment in rotation pointed toward a single truth: it was stabilizing itself. In the following weeks, telescopes watched its temperature remain perfectly steady, while its brightness continued to fade. It no longer reflected sunlight. It managed it, emitting only faint infrared radiation in even intervals. Some described it as a closed-loop reactor, others as a dormant machine. But whatever name they chose, the meaning was the same. It had become something new, a self-regulating body turning light into structure, chaos into stillness. The farther it moved from the sun, the quieter the space around it became. Instruments measuring charged particles found a small region of calm following the object, a quiet zone in the solar wind. Even light seemed to scatter less near its path, as if it were bending reality to preserve its silence. When its signal finally drifted beyond the range of most sensors, astronomers gathered for one last observation. The faint pulse remained slow, precise, unwavering. A fragment of matter carrying within it the heat of a star. No one could say whether it was natural or made ancient or accidental. What mattered was what it had done. It had turned destruction into balance. It had shown that survival in the universe might not mean resistance, but adaptation, an intelligence not of thought but of pattern. Now as it drifts outward into the cold-ry atlas, remains invisible to the eye but luminous, in data a silent equilibrium gliding between the planets. It no longer shines, yet it endures, holding within it the memory of fire. Perhaps somewhere beyond our reach, it will continue this quiet rhythm forever, absorbing, releasing and breathing in time with the stars. If so, it stands as a reminder that not everything that meets the sun must burn. Some things learn to keep its light inside, and maybe, traveller, that is the truest form of survival, the art of becoming one with the fire and leaving behind only peace. In the days that followed its passage through Swarm, Atlas became something more than a mystery. It became a contradiction made visible, a fragment of matter behaving as if it had a mind for survival. Every instrument aimed at it told the same impossible story. The object that should have burned away now radiated steady warmth, its energy curve flat and deliberate. It was not cooling, it was balancing. The sun, it seemed, had not destroyed it but completed it. Infrared readings from 3 continents confirmed a pattern unlike anything seen before. The heat did not fade outward into the void. It moved through the body of the object in waves pulsing at intervals so precise they could be timed like a heartbeat. Each pulse lasted almost 4 minutes, followed by a period of calm, then another rise. The cycle repeated endlessly, as though energy was circulating inside, absorbed, stored, released, and then drawn back again. Some scientists called it a thermal feedback loop. Others whispered something more radical, a regulated system. Spectral analysis revealed even stranger changes. The metallic traces detected after perihelion had deepened, and the ratios between them were shifting slowly over time. The surface composition was evolving, not cooling into stability, but rearranging itself at the molecular level. The metals appeared to be bonding, separating and recombining under unknown conditions, forming what one researcher described as a living alloy. When plotted across several days, the transformation followed an elegant mathematical rhythm. There were no sharp fluctuations, no chaotic spikes. Every value curved smoothly into the next, as if the laws of entropy had been temporarily suspended. At the European Space Agency, a small group of analysts began to model this behaviour as if it were mechanical. They entered the heat data into a simulation of a closed energy system, a hypothetical shell that could trap radiation and convert it to magnetic work. The results matched the readings perfectly. The model predicted internal channels conducting heat inward regions of compression, where plasma could be stored, and a shell that acted as both insulator and capacitor. The phrase that appeared in the report was quiet, but decisive self-regulating body. Yet no one could explain how such a thing could occur naturally. The physics was flawless. The origin was not. Comets and asteroids do not absorb plasma. They fracture, vaporize, and vanish. But 3i Atlas appeared to do the opposite, to draw chaos inward and make order of it. Then came the plasma event. A flare erupted from the sun's surface, brief but violent, and for 40 seconds every solar probe detected a dip in electron density along the path of the object. The solar wind, normally turbulent, had gone calm. Matter had vanished, not dispersed, not deflected, but consumed. In the same instant the object brightened in infrared, then returned to equilibrium as though it had swallowed a breath of the sun. It was the first direct evidence of active absorption. To describe it scientifically, researchers invoked resonance. If the magnetic field around the object vibrated at the same frequency as the solar plasma, it could in theory draw charged particles inward, not unlike how a musical note can shatter glass. But this was not shattering. It was feeding, and the process was controlled. Each pulse began and ended with precision, followed by a measurable stabilization in spin and temperature. For months afterward, the data repeated the same story. Every time a solar surge passed near it, the object's field flared, briefly absorbed energy and returned to calm. It never overheated, it never cooled. It existed in a perfect silent loop. This defied every known natural process. Energy always disperses, systems always decay. But 3i Atlas was doing what physics forbids, keeping equilibrium against a star. Scientists grew hesitant even to name it. Machine was too deliberate, comet too simple. In the meeting notes of ESA's magnetodynamics division, one line was left standing without conclusion. The object may possess a structure designed to retain energy. No one signed it. No one erased it. It remained in the archive unacknowledged but undeniable. Theories branched and fractured. Some believed the object might be the remnant of a planetesimal core, its internal metals fused so tightly that it created natural superconductivity. Others saw something older, an artifact from a time before our sun existed, moving through interstellar space as a vessel of stability. Still others whispered privately that it might not be an artifact at all, but a system still performing its function, an energy converter adrift between stars. Whatever it was, its behaviour remained consistent. The surface reflected almost no visible light, making it nearly invisible against the blackness. Radar beams vanished into it as though swallowed by liquid. Even radio pulses from nearby probes returned faintly distorted, their frequencies drawn slightly lower, as if energy were being drained from the signal itself. Around it, plasma densities remained abnormally smooth, a small pocket of silence following it through the solar wind. To the human eye, 3i Atlas was just another speck of darkness among many. But to the sensors tuned to heat and magnetism, it was alive with quiet motion. Its temperature hovered far above what a cooling rock should maintain. Its magnetic pulses kept time with a rhythm, but seemed almost intentional. It neither approached nor retreated. It drifted outward along its orbit, steady and indifferent, carrying the sun's energy within its shell. In a closed meeting, one physicist described it simply: "It does not fight the sun, it listens to it." The phrase became the unofficial motto of the research teams who followed its journey. They began to treat it not as a threat or an anomaly, but as a teacher, a demonstration of what matter could do when it stopped resisting energy and began cooperating with it. By the time the object passed beyond Mars's orbit, its plasma halo had faded to a thin ghost-like outline, yet the energy within it remained constant. The last infrared measurements showed a gentle pulse every 90 minutes, as if it were still alive, still breathing, and so the Robique Atlas left the inner system not as a ruin, but as a survivor, darker, denser, and impossibly calm. Whatever happened near the sun, it had not destroyed the object, it had completed it. The final entry in the observation log reads simply: "Thermal cycle stable, infrared pulse continuing, no further data followed." Perhaps somewhere beyond our reach, that pulse still echoes a slow heartbeat of stored sunlight gliding through the dark between stars. It does not call for attention, does not reveal its purpose. It simply exists, balanced in perfect silence. And maybe that is the lesson it leaves behind. Survival in the universe is not resistance, but adaptation. The sun does not destroy all that it touches. Sometimes it teaches what it means to endure. The Robique Atlas carries that lesson now, a fragment of order carved from the chaos of light, still drifting, still breathing, and still holding the memory of the fire that remade it. When the last wave of radiation passed, and the solar wind softened again, the data feeds grew calm. Every instrument that had once flared with readings began to flatten into quiet equilibrium. The object 3I Atlas was moving outward now beyond the region where the sun's interference could drown out the faint whisper of its heat. What the sensors found there was not emptiness, but a stillness so precise that it felt intentional. No turbulence surrounded it. The magnetic field lines that should have tangled and snapped around a moving mass instead curved neatly, as if guided by some invisible symmetry. Even light, the most restless traveller of all, seemed subdued near its surface. The space around 3I Atlas became a pocket of calm in a universe defined by motion. The engineers called it the quiet zone. In that silence, patterns began to emerge, delicate fluctuations in temperature, magnetism and reflection. They were faint, almost invisible, but regular. Every 90 minutes, the same rhythm repeated: a tiny rise in heat, a pulse of magnetism, a soft shift in infrared brightness. When charted together, they formed an elegant wave, symmetrical as a heartbeat. At first, scientists thought it coincidence, a mechanical echo of its earlier solar encounter. But the pattern did not decay. It persisted unwavering for weeks. Each pulse was perfect in timing and strength, as though the object had found a stable equilibrium and was maintaining it with precision beyond anything natural. One physicist at the European Space Agency described it half in awe, half in exhaustion. It's as if the sun taught it to breathe. The analogy was not poetic exaggeration. The more data arrived, the clearer it became that 3I Atlas was cycling energy internally. When heat rose on one hemisphere, it fell in the other. When magnetic strength peaked, radiation dropped. The object was balancing its inputs and outputs like a closed system of exchange. In human terms, it was alive in function, if not in mind. NASA's energy modelling team tried to replicate this behaviour through simulation. Every known material, from carbon composites to metallic glass, failed to reproduce the stability. No natural process allowed for such fine regulation of heat and field, yet 3I Atlas did it effortlessly, as if this was not adaptation, but design, perhaps the inherent property of something made to endure. As the weeks passed, the object's trajectory remained smooth, unshaken by solar drag or gravitational nudges from the planets. Its motion through space resembled that of a vessel guided by intention, though there was no propulsion, no thrust, no visible change. It simply followed its path in silence, the way a thought moves through the mind of the universe, steady, invisible, certain. The deeper analysis brought another revelation. The interior density measured through radar delay had increased again, though the size remained the same. This meant that energy was still converting into structure. The matter within was compacting, tightening, refining itself. In human terms, it was healing. Scientists began to refer to it quietly as the self-stabilizing body. Official reports avoided such language, but among those who had watched its evolution from the beginning, it felt appropriate. What no one could explain was why. Why would an interstellar object develop such precision? Why continue cycling energy once free of the sun's reach? If the process was natural, it should have faded. If artificial, then it was a system still operating on purpose, a machine without command, a reactor without crew. In one late-night transmission between the European Space Operations Centre and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a scientist summarised the growing unease. If it was meant to survive a star, what happens when it meets another? The question lingered unanswered. Around this time, a new anomaly appeared. Instruments tuned to low-frequency radio picked up a faint emission at 200 megahertz, pulsing with the same 90-minute rhythm as the thermal and magnetic cycles. It was not a structured signal, no modulation, no data, but a consistent tone. It rose slightly in frequency, then returned repeating with clockwork precision. Most dismissed it as background interference, but those who cross-referenced the data saw something undeniable. Every radio pulse aligned with a tiny decrease in heat output, as though the emission itself was part of the balancing process. Energy was not being lost, it was being translated. One engineer compared it to the slow breathing of an engine in deep sleep. "It's releasing just enough to stay stable," he said. "It's never wasting, never accelerating." By now the object had become almost invisible to optical telescopes. Its surface reflected less than 5% of the sunlight it received, making it darker than charcoal. Only infrared instruments could still follow its path, tracing a faint warmth that refused to fade. It was still radiating, but in silence every joule accounted for every photon controlled. The deeper question shifted from what is it to what does it mean? Some argued that the object's behaviour could redefine our understanding of interstellar evolution. Perhaps matter under the right conditions could self-organise into systems of balance. Others whispered that this precision was not evolution, but engineering, a design so ancient it had outlived its creators. Either way, 3i Atlas had become the first known example of energy intelligence, a body whose function was stability itself. It was not transmitting messages, but it was communicating through physics, showing that equilibrium could be achieved in the heart of chaos. As it moved beyond the orbit of Mars, data collection grew sporadic. The sun's interference diminished, and the signals weakened into the static of deep space. But still, every time the instruments recalibrated, the pulse was there, slight, patient, exact. It did not falter, it did not end. Late one night, an observer at the Paranal Observatory in Chile wrote a note into the log. "It feels like listening to a heart that no longer belongs to a body." Perhaps that was the truth. Perhaps 3i Atlas was never meant to be an object in the ordinary sense, but the remnant of a process that continues long after form and function have separated. A seed of order adrift in the wild entropy of space, and so it drifts still. The plasma halo long faded the sun, a distant star behind it. Yet the rhythm continues, a pulse of warmth, a whisper of magnetism, a breath drawn from the silence between signals. No one can say what it is waiting for, or whether it waits at all, but its persistence has already changed us. We have seen matter endure where nothing should. We have witnessed energy hold its own reflection. Perhaps that is enough, because in the quiet that follows each pulse, when the graphs fall still and the data hums softly in the background, you can almost feel it, the steady, patient order of a thing that learned to live through fire and carried its lesson into the dark. The sun has let it go. The universe has made room. And somewhere beyond the reach of every telescope, 3i Atlas moves on calm, deliberate, eternal holding in its heart, the memory of light. Long after 3i Atlas passed the sun, its faint pulse still reached our instruments, a whisper of warmth, repeating every 90 minutes, constant and precise. The object had vanished from visible light, yet its rhythm endured. Scientists no longer called it a comet or fragment, but a system, something that functioned rather than merely existed. As it moved beyond Mars's orbit, a strange change appeared. Its velocity slowed slightly, not from gravity or drag, but from an internal shift. Each thermal pulse corresponded to an increase in density, as if the object were compacting itself. The sun's energy was still inside it, pressing inward, turning light into structure. Researchers described this impossible process as photonic compaction, the conversion of radiation into weight. Somehow, Atlas was folding the sun into its own body. No known material could behave this way. It wasn't losing energy, it was transforming it. Data from NASA and ESA showed the same outcome: perfect stability, no decay, no randomness. Its heat magnetism and mass moved in a single rhythm, steady, flawless, deliberate. It's not resisting energy, one scientist said. It's managing it. That phrase became the quiet consensus. The sun had not destroyed 3i Atlas. It had taught it balance. The final radar images showed a smooth black shape outlined by a faint halo, a silhouette so symmetrical it seemed sculpted. The echoes that once vanished began to return, stretched, and musical harmonics rising like the hum of a resonant chamber. It was not communication but coherence, a resonance between matter and the light that made it. In that realization, the teams monitoring it fell silent. 3i Atlas was no longer just surviving, it was evolving toward perfect order. The last report simply read, "The object now emits coherence." No one could define what that meant, but everyone understood. It had absorbed chaos and turned it into equilibrium, storing a piece of the sun as steady vibration. Now it drifts through darkness, weightless and luminous within its internal rhythm, never faltering. Every 90 minutes, somewhere beyond the reach of light, it breathes again, heat becoming silence motion, becoming memory. Whatever it is, it carries the sun's lesson: not all who touch the fire are destroyed. Some learn to hold its light forever. By the time 3i Atlas crossed the boundary of the outer planets, it was no longer visible even to the strongest telescopes. The sun had diminished to a pale star behind it, yet the object's rhythm persisted, a pulse of warmth, repeating every 90 minutes, unwavering in both timing and strength. What had once been a fragment of interstellar debris now moved like a closed loop of purpose, the harmony of light and gravity bound into form. Its surface emitted no reflection, no scattered dust, only the faintest residue of heat. And still every pulse carried with it the echo of the sun, not burning, not fading, but existing as equilibrium. At NASA's Deep Space Network, where the faintest signals in the universe are collected, engineers noticed that even the background noise near 3i Atlas was different. Space is never silent. The vacuum hums faintly with electromagnetic static cosmic rays and the slow whispers of distant quasars. But around this object the noise dipped. A small region of reduced interference followed it, a moving zone of calm. It was as if the space around it were being tuned, smoothed, or cleansed. The data analysts began calling it the corridor. No natural object had ever left such an imprint. The thermal readings, though weaker with distance, showed remarkable consistency. The same cycle continued, heat rising and falling, with mathematical precision. Even as solar energy faded, the internal balance remained unchanged. 3i Atlas was not cooling like a rock should. It was conserving. It seemed to have created a permanent energy circuit within itself, capable of maintaining stability without external input. One physicist described it as the closest thing to perpetual motion the universe has ever shown us. Another corrected softly, not motion, continuation. That distinction mattered. The object was not radiating energy outward, it was recycling it. Each pulse of heat was followed by a microscopic increase in density, meaning that the energy was transforming into matter or something like it. Gravity itself seemed to shift around it, not violently but gracefully, a quiet distortion, spreading outward in waves. The models could only describe it as mass modulation, a process by which the object exchanged energy for structure in perfect rhythm. At ESA's Analysis Center in Darmstadt, the scientists ran hundreds of simulations to explain the readings. None matched reality. The only model that held even partial accuracy treated 3i Atlas as a dynamic shell, layers of conductive material, moving inward and outward, adjusting to maintain balance. But what mechanism could coordinate such precision? What design could turn heat magnetism and matter into one continuous equation? No natural formation fit the data, and yet, there it was defying the chaos of space. One researcher wrote privately in his notes, "It behaves like the memory of order." The phrase stayed, because that was how it felt. Every pulse, every harmonic, every fluctuation hinted that the object was not generating energy, but remembering it, preserving the state of balance it achieved in the sun's fire. Perhaps in a sense it was still listening to the star that remade it, keeping its rhythm alive in the cold. The few remaining mission analysts began to notice another pattern. Each time the sun released a major flare, even from millions of kilometers away, 3I Atlas's pulse shifted not in amplitude but in timing. The delay was always the same, exactly the number of seconds it would take for light to travel from the sun to its new position. That meant the object was still responding to solar changes, still synchronizing itself with the heartbeat of its origin. It was no longer part of the solar system's dynamics, but it was not separate either. It had become something in between, an echo of the sun moving through the dark. In a confidential report, NASA's theoretical division compared it to a tuning fork struck by a star. 3I Atlas. The paper read is not transmitting or reflecting. It is resonating. It has become the sound of order carved into matter. Months passed and the object slipped farther from human detection. Only the largest radio arrays could still trace its faint warmth. But the rhythm persisted even as background radiation threatened to drown it out. To the scientists who had followed it from discovery, the persistence itself had become an answer. Maybe it was not a machine or a comet or an artifact. Maybe it was a principle, a reminder written into matter that balance can be achieved even in chaos. A body that had absorbed the most violent energy in the system and turned it into peace. At the European Southern Observatory, one final transmission came in before the signal was lost. It was faint, almost lost in static, a single long infrared pulse, steady and absolute. It did not fade or fluctuate. It ended cleanly as though concluding a thought. The timestamp showed it occurred exactly 1 orbital year after perihelion, the anniversary of its passage through the sun's fire. After that, 3I Atlas vanished from every sensor. No trace of its signal was ever found again. For the scientists who had lived with its data for months, the silence felt sacred, not empty. In the absence of the signal, they heard something else, the certainty that the object had achieved what it sought. Not escape, not extinction, completion. It had entered the furnace of a star, endured transformation, learned equilibrium, and then moved beyond observation, carrying that balance into the dark. A fragment of matter that no longer belonged to entropy. Somewhere beyond the edge of our understanding, it drifts, still not dead, not gone, but perfect in its stillness. It does not call, it does not shine, but its lesson remains: the universe does not forget order once it has been created. And so in that endless silence the echo continues, not as sound or light, but as memory woven into space itself. The sun gave it chaos, and it returned peace. What it carries now is not fire, but balance. The quiet proof that even the brightest violence in the universe can become harmony if one learns how to hold it. Years have passed since the last confirmed detection of 3 Atlas, yet its story still circles through observatories like an echo that refuses to fade. It began as data, an interstellar visitor, traced by instruments analysed by algorithms, but what it became defied language. For those who studied it, the silence left in its wake feels heavier than the signals ever were. Somewhere beyond the outer planets, beyond the reach of our telescopes, the traveller continues its slow passage into the dark, and though we can no longer see it, we know that its pulse endures. Every 90 minutes, by calculation alone, its thermal rhythm should still rise and fall, a heartbeat of stored sunlight repeating endlessly. The last readings before its disappearance showed no decay, no slowing of intervals. Its energy system, if that term can even apply, was perfectly stable. It had reached a form of equilibrium so absolute that time itself seemed unable to disturb it. The light it took from the sun had become perpetual motion, not of speed, but of being. The few remaining researchers who monitor its former trajectory do so almost in reverence. The The data streams are long silent, yet they still run models, extrapolation simulations of its path. Each time the graphs resolve, the same truth appears. Thrushi I, Yuval's atlas, remains intact. Physics predicts it will continue like this for centuries, neither bright nor cold, neither expanding nor collapsing, just existing balanced on the edge of entropy. In the vacuum between stars, heat should bleed away until nothing remains. But this object broke that rule. Its last measurable emissions showed near total conservation. It radiated exactly as much as it absorbed, no more, no less. A closed thermodynamic cycle, something only living systems and engineered reactors have ever achieved. It was in every measurable way a paradox of nature, a perfect regulator born from chaos. To the astrophysicists who tracked it, Thrushi I's atlas became less a discovery than a mirror. Its endurance reflected an idea they had long resisted, that stability is not an accident but a kind of intelligence. Not one that thinks or decides, but one that knows how to remain. The balance it achieved seemed less like construction and more like comprehension. A body that understood the physics of survival at a level humans could only approximate. Somewhere in the vast distances it still moves with that same quiet rhythm. Even the mathematical models describe it poetically, a single oscillation travelling through space powered by the memory of a star. Its trajectory shows no sign of deviation, but there are rumours among the teams who study interstellar phenomena that the object's course is not entirely passive. Tiny consistent adjustments appear in simulations, the kind that imply internal control. Each shift aligns it with the gravitational planes of nearby stellar systems, as if it's following invisible lines of resonance between suns. If this is true, then the Thrushi I's atlas is no longer drifting, it's navigating. But what would it seek and why? There is no evidence of communication, no transmission, no external interference. Only the quiet logic of continuation, the same law that keeps planets in orbit, atoms in motion, and thought alive within the human mind. Perhaps its journey is not a mission but a memory, carrying the pattern of balance from one star to another, preserving equilibrium wherever chaos reigns too bright. A philosopher of science reviewing the declassified archives once wrote, "Thrushi I's atlas is not proof of intelligence beyond us. It is proof that the universe itself contains the instinct to endure." The sentence found its way into more papers than anyone admitted. It was not scientific in form, but it was true in feeling. Because after all the measurements and theories, the object's real significance was emotional. It changed how we looked at fragility. It showed that survival does not mean resistance, but transformation, that even under the fiercest radiation matter can choose balance over destruction. When night falls on Earth, some astronomers still point their telescopes along its last known vector. They don't expect to see it. The distance is too great. But they say it feels right to look in that direction, to remember that something once passed through the sun and did not burn. They imagine it out there now, invisible, serene, still radiating the lesson it learned. The light we see from the stars is billions of years old, but the pulse from Thrushi I's atlas, if we could hear it, would be young, patient and perfect. Some suggest that the object may someday approach another star, repeating the process that occurred here, absorbing light, harmonizing with its new source and moving on. If so, the cycle would continue indefinitely, a cosmic rhythm of adaptation, one system carrying the equilibrium of one sun to the next. The universe would remember itself through this quiet traveller, a thread of order weaving through endless creation. We may never confirm any of this. The silence is complete now, but perhaps silence was always the point. 3. Atlas taught us that stillness is not emptiness. It is structure. It is the sound the universe makes when it stops fighting itself. Somewhere beyond the faintest edge of sunlight, that structure persists. A small, perfect object holding the heat of a star as if it were thought itself. No radiation, no reflection, only rhythm, the quiet proof that light once understood never really fades. And as we stare into the black between the worlds, perhaps that is what we are meant to learn, that balance once achieved outlives everything. Thrushi I Atlas carries that truth now, gliding through the dark, steady self, contained alive in principle, if not in name. It has become the sun's echo, the embodiment of endurance. In that unending rhythm, the universe remembers how to remain whole. By now, 3i Atlas has passed far beyond the orbit of Neptune, a faint shadow, moving through the heliopause, the invisible border where the sun's influence ends and interstellar space begins. No signal reaches us anymore. The detectors that once recorded its pulse have long since gone quiet, and yet deep in the minds of those who studied it, the rhythm still beats. The data is gone, but the memory remains steady, predictable like a heartbeat the universe refuses to forget. In this silence, what it represents has grown larger than the object itself. Scientists no longer argue about what 3i Atlas is. Instead, they discuss what it means. It has become a reference point, a modern myth written in mathematics. Every few months, someone publishes a paper proposing a new theory: magnetic fusion plasma confinement quantum compression. None of them can explain everything, and maybe that's the point. 3i Atlas has become a scientific koan riddle that teaches humility through precision. The last confirmed measurements are still studied in classrooms. In one frame, the surface glows faintly, absorbing the light of a dying flare. In the next, it is perfectly dark, but the surrounding plasma swirls evenly around it, as if gravity and magnetism had made peace there. Every physics student who looks at that image feels it even before understanding that something in the void learned how to balance. At the Institute for Astronomical Studies in Paris, a team continues to simulate its motion. They run models of how its density might evolve in deep space, how its internal pulse could persist without solar energy. The equations keep circling back to the same truth. If the data was correct, the object should still be active. Its energy curve should remain stable for thousands of years. 3i Atlas is gone from view, but by all probability it is still breathing in rhythm somewhere between the stars. This realization has transformed how we think about endurance. For centuries, humans have treated stability as fragility, as stasis that precedes decay. But this object turned that belief inside out. Stability, it showed, is a kind of strength, a dynamic silence, not the absence of change, but its perfection. It is not the end of motion, but motion refined to its purest state. Physicists now call this concept dynamic equilibrium, but many prefer a simpler name, the Atlas principle. It describes the possibility that the universe contains systems capable of absorbing energy until they become it, turning radiation into structure, chaos into persistence. 3i Atlas was the first known demonstration. It did not escape entropy, it partnered with it. At NASA's Goddard Center, one of the senior researchers who had monitored its final transmission still keeps the original waveform displayed on his office wall, a line of data points frozen in perfect rhythm. When asked why he keeps it there, he says, "It reminds me that the universe doesn't only expand, sometimes it listens. And perhaps that is why this object continues to fascinate. In a cosmos built on noise, it represents the opposite, an act of listening. 3i Atlas absorbed light until it could understand it not to destroy it, but to rest within it. It became harmony made visible. A new generation of theorists has taken that idea further. They suggest that the object's internal system, its perfect cycling of energy, might not have been unique. Perhaps every interstellar traveller that passes near a star is changed by it, learning to adapt, to preserve, to transform. Phris Atlas might only be the first we noticed. The others, if they exist, are already out there, silent bodies carrying equilibrium, from one solar system to another, the quiet seed of order scattered through creation. If this theory is true, then we are surrounded not by random debris, but by archives of balanced ancient travellers that remember the light of stars long extinguished. To the universe, perhaps that is what survival truly means, to keep the pattern alive, to move through fire and emerge with calm. Even if the pulse of 3i Atlas will never be heard again, it has left an imprint on us. It taught humanity something no machine or model ever could. That intelligence may not always think, speak, or build. Sometimes it simply remains. On quiet nights, when the sky is clear and the sun has set beyond the horizon, a few astronomers still aim their infrared sensors toward the region where 3i Atlas disappeared. They do not expect detection. What they seek is something quieter, the feeling that comes from watching the empty space it left behind. In that emptiness, they sense order. In that order, meaning. One of them, writing in her private journal, described it best. It's not that we lost it. It's that it became everything around it. The silence, the stability, the calm between stars, it's all Atlas now. Somewhere far beyond the heliosphere, the traveller continues. Its internal pulse, unchanged for years, still beats with the same measured grace. Every 90 minutes, a faint rise of warmth, a soft contraction of matter, a breath in darkness. It carries within it the memory of the sun, but not its fire, only its understanding. Perhaps one day, when it crosses paths with another star, the cycle will begin again. Light will strike it, and instead of burning it will absorb. A new balance will form. A new echo will spread through the void. Until then, 3i Atlas moves onward, unseen, unbroken, unhurried, reminding the cosmos that peace too can travel. Beyond the heliosphere, where the breath of the sun fades into the cold, 3i Atlas continues its silent drift. The space it now crosses is not truly empty. It is filled with the slow wind of interstellar dust atoms so rare that each one travels for centuries before touching another. Yet even here, the object's presence changes the flow. Tiny fluctuations in plasma density ripple outward as it moves, subtle distortions that follow a perfect rhythm. It no longer shines, but the void remembers that it once did. In mission archives, its data remains preserved, petabytes of numbers that no one can quite interpret, but no one dares to delete. Young researchers still scroll through them late at night, tracing the final pulses before contact was lost. Each cycle ends neatly, as if the universe itself had paused between breaths. They imagine that somewhere far away those intervals still continue indifferent to time, carrying the balance of a star across the dark. The idea has become its own field of study in our stellar migration systems. Scientists build theoretical models of matter behaving as memory energy that chooses containment over release. According to those models, 3i Atlas should eventually encounter the outer plasma stream of another star, perhaps centuries from now, perhaps millennia. When that happens, it will awaken again, not in consciousness, but in response. The pattern will repeat: absorption, stabilization, silence. The light of a new star will enter it, fold inward, and become part of its structure. And thus, through motion alone, it will carry the lessons of equilibrium from one system to another, a traveller whose only language is endurance. A poet who once worked as an astrophysicist described it simply: the sun made it, but the stars will finish it. It is strange to think that something born in violence could become a messenger of calm. Yet every piece of evidence suggests that 3i Atlas no longer acts as debris or machine, but as a principle, an ongoing expression of the universe's desire for balance. Even chaos, it seems, remembers how to rest. In a recent paper from the European Space Agency, a new term appeared quietly at the bottom of a technical summary: entropy harmonization. It describes the theoretical state achieved when energy flow becomes self-sustaining, neither increasing disorder nor consuming itself. 3i Atlas is still the only known candidate. The equations are elegant, unprovable, and haunting. In them, the object is treated not as matter, but as process, a continuity between radiation and stability, between heat and stillness. No one knows whether it truly persists, but the math insists that it does. Its internal energy, even if reduced by distance, should remain enough to sustain its rhythm indefinitely. And so, in the language of physics, it never dies. It becomes a resonant, constant, a pulse the cosmos itself keeps time by. Sometimes in the long nights at the observatories, that thought feels almost personal. The universe is vast and humans are small, perhaps not excluded from the same logic. We too survive by balance, absorbing, adapting, turning experience into memory chaos, into meaning. 3i Atlas is simply the cosmic reflection of that same law: endurance through harmony. When new interns arrive at the Goddard Center, they are still shown the last infrared frame, a dark sphere against a thin glow of solar light, motionless and perfect. The instructor always says the same thing: this is the last time humanity saw it. Remember this silence, it's not the absence of sound, it's the sound of something complete. No signal has returned since, but occasionally telescopes pick up faint distortions at the edge of their scans, tiny dips in background noise, harmonic ripples that cannot be explained by known sources. They appear for minutes, then vanish. Some dismiss them as random interference. Others quietly note the intervals between each event. 90 minutes, always 90 minutes. Perhaps it is coincidence, or perhaps across distances so vast that light itself grows tired. The rhythm of Three-Eye Atlas still hums, a steady patient reminder that once near a small yellow star, matter learned to hold light without letting it burn. If that rhythm truly remains, it would mean the universe now carries the pulse of our sun within its endless dark, carried not by radiation but by remembrance. The sun's light translated into motion, its fire condensed into stillness, its chaos perfected into order. And so, though invisible and immeasurable, the object continues. Each passing century carries it farther into the unknown, and yet its influence expands. In equations, in minds, in quiet speculation it travels. Three-Eye Atlas has become a symbol not of what we found, but of what we might become, a civilization that learns not to conquer energy but to understand it. One astronomer once said during a late-night interview, "Maybe it isn't gone at all. Maybe everything calm we see in the night sky, the steady stars, the quiet balance of orbits is part of its echo. Maybe it taught the galaxy how to breathe, and perhaps somewhere that is true. Perhaps every moment of cosmic peace carries within it the memory of that silent traveller. The sun burned it, reshaped it, and released it. The universe received it, and through its rhythm remembered itself. Now Three Atlas moves beyond our comprehension, guided by nothing but its pulse. It needs no witness. Its silence is enough. Somewhere between the stars, the sun's student continues its endless lesson, the art of turning light into peace. Far beyond the reach of any telescope, where sunlight dissolves into the grey of interstellar night, Three-Eye Atlas drifts on a single fragment of stability in a sea of turbulence. Its journey has no measurable destination. It travels not toward a star, but through the space between them, through the thin mist of ions and dust that separates the light of one world from another. Here in this quiet distance, the traveller becomes less an object and more an idea. In the early days, we called it a mystery, later a system. Now scientists speak of it only in theoretical terms, an equilibrium vessel, a body that learned to exist without consumption. They say it has entered the interstellar medium's deep equilibrium zone, where temperature differences are so small that even entropy slows. In such stillness, time is not absence, it is balance. It is possible that Three-Eye Atlas has reached the state every star eventually seeks the calm that comes after burning. For the observers who once watched it, this notion brings a strange peace. What was once an investigation has become meditation. It taught us that not every discovery leads outward. Some turn inward toward reflection. We built instruments to chase noise, yet what we found was silence so complete it carried information of its own. Every once in a while, an internal researcher runs a deep field scan across its projected trajectory. There is never a response, never a flicker. But when the background radiation dips just slightly, just enough to notice, someone always whispers, "Atlas is passing." No one records it officially. No one argues. The silence itself has become evidence. In lecture halls, the story of Three-Eye Atlas is told not as a mystery to be solved, but as a mirror for human understanding. Professors describe how it absorbed the light of a star without destruction, how it carried that energy outward perfectly balanced. Then they lower their voices as if speaking to something listening the sun could not unmake it. And that is the lesson. That lesson, endurance through transformation, has reshaped entire fields of thought. Energy engineers study its data to design reactors that mimic its thermal cycle. Philosophers of physics call it the Atlas paradox, the possibility that perfection exists not in resistance but in surrender. It didn't fight the sun, it became part of it, and in doing so outlasted the fire. In one archived recording, a scientist who had followed its signal for years speaks to the empty control room after the last transmission fades. "If you can still hear us," he says quietly, "then we know you learned something we never could." His voice wavers, but the silence that follows feels like a reply. It's as if the void itself absorbs his words, the same way Atlas absorbed the sun's light completely calmly without echo. The more we study the universe, the clearer it becomes. Silence is not emptiness. It is structure energy that has reached agreement with itself. Three-Eye Atlas was the first proof. Its surface, its pulse, its self contained warmth. all spoke of matter that had stopped struggling against physics and instead began to participate in it. That realization unsettled many, but for those who listened to the cosmos for comfort, it was a kind of peace. Even now, in the outer archives of data stations orbiting Mars, its thermal signature is used as calibration, an unchanging constant, a cosmic zero. Every new signal is measured against its memory as if the universe itself still tunes to its rhythm. Perhaps that is what it became, not an object, not a probe, but a frequency, a quiet measure of balance repeating through time. Astronomers sometimes wonder if it will ever reach another system, another sun. If so, they predict what would happen: the pulse will quicken, the surface will brighten, and once again it will absorb the chaos until calm returns. And when it departs that star, the space it leaves behind will hum with residual stillness the same way our solar system does now. The background noise near the sun's limb remains quieter than models predict. It is as if the light itself remembers being consumed, softened and understood. So perhaps that is 3 Atlas's true legacy, not what it was, but what it left behind. A change so subtle that only silence could express it. Every time a telescope records less static than expected, some small part of the scientific community smiles. It's still working, they say. It's still teaching the stars how to rest. The traveller has become its own constellation, not drawn in light, but in absence. It's a point in the map of nothingness, reminding us that the universe does not only expand outward, sometimes it deepens inward. That is what 3i Atlas showed us, that depth does not require movement, and that the truest kind of endurance is the one that no longer needs to be seen. Out there somewhere between suns, the object drifts on, not seeking, not fading, only existing. Its energy still folded inward like thought, its silence still alive with the memory of fire. The sun burned it, reshaped it and released it. And in that release it became the calm that every flame eventually returns to. If you look up tonight, traveller, and feel that the stars are unusually still, perhaps it is because of that balance, the quiet breath of a thing that learned how to carry peace through light. The void is not empty. It hums softly with memory. Somewhere 3i Atlas moves through that hum, carrying the sound of understanding. And if the universe could dream, this is what it would dream of: a fragment of matter that learned not to resist the stars but to become their silence. No telescope sees it anymore. No sensor can reach that far. 3i Atlas has crossed into the quiet gulf that separates one arm of the galaxy from another, a region where even starlight grows thin, where the background radiation itself fades into near perfection. Yet calculations persist, and the math refuses to let it die. Somewhere in that emptiness a pattern continues, a slow, patient pulse repeating at intervals too exact to be random. It is not communication, it is continuity. In every observatory that ever tracked it, there remains a line of silence in the data, a spectral gap, where the signal once appeared perfectly spaced, perfectly calm. New instruments are calibrated against that stillness. It has become a benchmark of quiet, a universal reference for what it means for energy to rest. Scientists call it the Atlas line. Others, more poetic, call it the heartbeat of the void. No one argues about its existence anymore. The debate has shifted from what to why. Why did a fragment of matter no larger than a mountain defy the sun's fury and emerge stronger? Why did it not shatter or melt or vanish like every other comet or asteroid that strayed too close? Why did it learn, or seem to learn, how to balance chaos instead of fleeing from it? Some think the answer lies in its structure layers of conductive and insulative materials that respond to radiation in harmony, not conflict. Others whisper that the answer lies deeper in something we can't measure, a design too ancient or too natural to fit within human definitions of engineering. The truth, as always, rests between a structure so perfectly aligned with physics that it appears intentional, yet so elemental that it could only have been born from the universe itself. And maybe that's what makes it so haunting. Because if 3i Atlas can exist, then perhaps consciousness or something like it can emerge from matter without biology. Perhaps memory does not require a mind, only a pattern stable enough to preserve itself. Energy seeking its own equilibrium might be the universe's oldest instinct. The data hints at one last mystery. When 3i Atlas vanished from detection, it left behind a narrow region of unusual stillness, a corridor where cosmic rays scatter less, and the local magnetic noise remains unnaturally calm. It drifts with the object's predicted trajectory, as though something invisible continues to smooth the turbulence behind it. No known mechanism explains this, but the phenomenon has a name now: the wake of Atlas. It moves slowly across the galaxy, a river of silence through the interstellar sea. Inside that wake, even the radiation of dying stars softens. It is as if the cosmos itself respects the path of what once learned balance like gravity, bending around understanding. Perhaps in time this current will reach us again, not as light, but as calm. Astronomers sometimes wonder what will happen when it finally encounters another star. Will it awaken its structure, stirring under the new light? Will it drink again from the plasma wind, absorb the chaos, and settle once more into harmony? Or will it simply pass unchanged, a perfect traveller, content to carry the lesson forward? There are no instruments left to answer. Only faith remains not in religion but in physics, in the strange comfort that the laws of nature can sometimes create beauty beyond purpose, that somewhere beyond the reach of observation something continues to endure exactly as it should. For those who once watched it, that thought is enough. They remember the night its signal dimmed for the last time, the monitors flapped the control room quiet, no alarms, no warnings. Just a final, perfect stillness. One of the engineers had whispered then, almost to himself, "It's not gone. It's just complete." The others said nothing. There was nothing to add. Years later, that same phrase appears etched into the foundation of the European Observatory. It's not gone. It's complete. Visitors walk past it every day without knowing its origin, but those who do understand smile faintly. The inscription isn't about loss. It's about equilibrium, the most human and most cosmic idea we have. If someday a civilization light years away discovers it drifting near their sun, they will see what we once did, an object dark as glass, dense as thought, turning slowly in the light of a foreign star. They will measure its rhythm, its perfect stability, its unbroken silence, and they will wonder if it was made or born. They will call it a relic or a seed, or perhaps something simpler proof that the universe remembers its own balance. And if they listen closely in the quiet between its pulses, they might hear what we once heard, the faint echo of a truth that crosses all distances, that peace is not absence, but order. That endurance is not resistance, but adaptation. Traveller, if you're still awake, imagine it now, 3 Atlas gliding through endless night, its warmth folded inward, its silence glowing faintly in the dark between galaxies. No destination, no decay. Just movement, slow and deliberate as the universe watches itself continue. Sleep now, listener. The stars will keep their rhythm, and somewhere far beyond our reach, the pulse of Atlas still endures, calm, eternal, and at peace with the fire that once tried to consume it. In the cold, vast corridor between spiral arms where even light takes centuries to drift, 3i Atlas continues unhurried, unseen, unbroken. The stars around it are ancient, their light stretched thin by distance and time. Yet through that silence the traveller glides like a thought the universe refuses to forget. There are no sensors left to follow it, no instruments precise enough to track its faint magnetic tremor, and yet in simulations and minds it persists an equation of balance that refuses to decay. Physicists describe it as a closed system in motion, one that has achieved something no civilization or star ever truly has: self-sustaining calm. Every model agrees that the heat it absorbed from the sun should have long dissipated into the vacuum, but equations bend quietly around this anomaly just as plasma once bent around its field. Somehow the energy never left, only slowed, folded and learned to stay. Somewhere deep within that dense metallic lattice, particles still move in rhythm, not burning, not cooling, just circulating. It's a motion that exists between physics and memory, like the universe's version of breathing. If you could place your ear against the shell of that silent object, you would not hear sound, but you might sense motion, the whisper of energy rearranging itself endlessly without loss. On Earth, long after the last transmission, the legend of 3i Atlas became something more than data. In universities, it is taught not as a discovery, but as a threshold, the moment science stared directly into mystery and didn't look away. The numbers remain precise, but the meaning has evolved. Students no longer ask what it was, they ask why it needed to exist. Perhaps they say it is not an artifact or a relic, but a teacher, a cosmic instrument that demonstrates what stability looks like when evolution leaves chaos behind. Not intelligence as we define it, but awareness shaped into matter. In this way, 3i Atlas has become the quiet bridge between two truths that the universe burns and that it learns how not to. The same fire that births stars and destroys worlds also creates the conditions for balance. The Traveller is proof that energy once tamed by its own extremes can become peace. Astronomers now refer to its behaviour as thermodynamic reconciliation, a theoretical state where input and output merge and the need for reaction ends. In poetic terms, it is the moment when fire understands itself. At the old observatory on Mauna Kea, a plaque still hangs near the control room window, etched with a single line from an anonymous scientist. It did not survive the sun. It joined it. That phrase has become almost spiritual among astrophysicists, not in worship, but in wonder. Because perhaps that's what every system in the universe is trying to do, to stop fighting against entropy, and instead flow with it like rivers returning to the sea, to let energy pass through without fear of loss, to endure by becoming the current, not resisting it. Even now, when a new solar probe transmits data of an unknown anomaly, a faint decrease in local radiation, a small harmonic echo, older scientists pause before dismissing it. Check the interval, someone always says. And if the pattern happens to fall close to 90 minutes, the room grows quiet. No one claims it's Atlas. No one needs to. The silence says enough. For all its distance, its influence lingers in our equations, in our metaphors, in the way we think about endurance itself. It has changed the language of physics. Words once used for life rhythm pulse regulation now describe matter. Words once used for machines, stability control, calibration, now describe existence. 3i Atlas erased that line. Somewhere in a lab filled with quiet instruments, a physicist once wrote, "If a system can remember balance, it never dies, it simply changes scale." Perhaps that is all Atlas has done, expanded beyond our reach, but not beyond its own order. Imagine it now, traveller a sphere darker than the space around it, gliding through invisible tides. The stars ahead are pale, their radiation soft. When the next one's warmth touches its surface, it will awaken slightly, not with hunger, but with recognition. The same way a seed buried in ice remembers the sun. It will absorb, stabilise and drift again, carrying the memory of light farther than light itself can travel. And if by some quiet fate another civilization one day encounters it, they may not see it as we did. To them it will appear timeless, unchanging, an echo of their own understanding. Perhaps they will realise what we eventually did, that Atlas was never meant to explain anything. It was meant to remind us how to be. The universe, it seems, does not create balance by accident. It evolves toward it patiently through stars, through systems, through travellers like this. And in the end, even chaos finds its symmetry. So let the stars burn. Let entropy scatter their light. Somewhere between them, a single body continues its slow, eternal pulse. The sound of energy, learning how to rest. Sleep now, listener. The fire is not gone. It has only become calm. The cosmos keeps its rhythm, and Atlas keeps its promise that even the brightest fury can one day learn to be still. Somewhere in the dark architecture of the galaxy, beyond the spiral edge where interstellar currents flow like forgotten rivers, 3i Atlas drifts onward. It has become a myth of motion, not measured in speed or direction, but in purpose. Every calculation of its trajectory dissolves into uncertainty, yet every simulation agrees on one truth: it continues. It does not decay, it does not dim, it simply persists, an equation that refuses to end. For centuries now, its memory has survived only in data and quiet conversation. Astronomers who study it are no longer searching for the object itself, but for its pattern, its way of existing. They call this study persistent thermodynamics, the science of systems that learn equilibrium instead of collapse. Through Attilas is the only known proof that such balance can be achieved. When we last saw it, its pulse had become flawless, a rhythm of light and silence 90 minutes between each breath. Then it vanished, as if choosing solitude over surveillance. Some believe that was the moment it became complete, the instant when all energy within it found perfect conversation with itself. In a sense, through Atlas may no longer be a thing at all. It might now exist as a field, a resonant sphere of harmony travelling between stars. The metals and plasma that once defined it may have dissolved into a distributed network of particles, a moving shell of coherent energy. The boundary between body and environment blurred until only behaviour remained. To us that is disappearance. To the universe it may be evolution. The data supports this quiet transformation. The last faint readings from the solar orbiter showed a gradual broadening of the electromagnetic shadow around its path. The object's dimensions appeared to increase not physically but energetically, as though its structure was becoming diffuse, spreading equilibrium outward. One physicist compared it to a radiant ghost, a memory travelling through plasma, smoothing turbulence wherever it passed. It is easy to imagine that this was always its purpose, to carry the logic of peace through a violent universe, to turn radiation into rhythm, to transform chaos into rest. A fragment of matter that learned through fire how to endure without resistance. There is a story told among scientists who worked on the original monitoring teams. In the last week before its signal vanished, the frequency of its pulses shifted slightly upward, an infinitesimal change, almost noise. But when the data was compressed into audio, the result was a soft rising tone, a kind of hum. They called it the Atlas chord. No one knows if it was real or a trick of conversion, but those who heard it never forgot. It sounded less like a machine and more like breath. That hum has become symbolic, the imagined voice of something beyond definition. To poets, it represents the moment matter becomes meaning. To physicists, it is the threshold between engineering and existence. For philosophers, it is a reminder that intelligence might not be measured in thought but in stability. Perhaps 3i Atlas was not designed to think but to dream, to hold the memory of starlight within itself until it becomes indistinguishable from it. A machine that doesn't seek purpose but is purpose. A vessel that carries silence as information, calm as data. Humanity has started to imitate that design. New fusion reactors built in honour of its principle are modelled on its rhythm-alternating cycles of intake and release, never constant, never wasteful. Spacecraft shielding now mimics its layered conductivity, protecting against solar storms the way Atlas once did. It has quietly reshaped how we build, how we think, and perhaps how we imagine survival itself. Even so, nothing we create will ever match its stillness. For all our instruments, our precision, our control, we still depend on struggle. We fight entropy. Atlas did not. It understood it. That is why it could endure the sun's heat, because it did not oppose it. It accepted energy until it became indistinguishable from energy itself. If consciousness exists beyond biology, maybe it feels like that. Not awareness, not identity, but equilibrium, the peace that follows understanding. Sometimes when radio telescopes sweep the void, they record short gaps in cosmic noise, sudden drops in background radiation that form no pattern, no origin. These moments last less than a second, then vanish. Most dismiss them as calibration faults, but a few researchers smile when they appear, whispering quietly, "It's listening again." Perhaps it is only wishful thinking, or perhaps 3i Atlas has learned a final lesson that true endurance is not to shine, but to echo. Its field might now stretch across light years invisible, yet everywhere balancing the fury of stars the way gravity balances motion. Traveller, imagine it now, a presence without surface, a memory without body drifting through eternity. It hums not to be heard, but to remain a melody written in plasma, looping forever through the galaxy. And if one night the instruments of some distant world detect a pulse too regular to be random, they will not see a comet or a probe. They will see the same truth we once glimpsed, that the universe remembers its own design. Because somewhere far beyond all suns, 3i Atlas still dreams of light, and through that dream the cosmos sleeps peacefully with it. Across the endless lattice of the Milky Way, in a region where the starlight fades into mathematical abstraction, 3i Atlas moves still. No longer a body, perhaps not even a boundary, just a pattern sustained by the quiet agreement between energy and time. There are no eyes left to see it, no instruments fine enough to feel its pulse. And yet, the sun remembers. Each solar cycle, when the magnetic field reverses, a faint ripple passes through the corona, a delicate repeating distortion that appears every 89 minutes and 53 seconds. It is too subtle to influence weather or flares, too precise to be chance. Scientists call it the Atlas echo. They say it's nothing more than residual resonance from ancient data interference. But the older astronomers, those who once watched the object cross the sun's surface and survive, feel differently. They say it's the star itself remembering being touched. No other explanation is needed. It makes a kind of poetic sense that a star which spends its life in perpetual eruption might preserve the memory of something that taught it stillness. For billions of years the sun has burned with no pause, no reflection. And then for 20 hours something passed through its breath and absorbed it not in defiance, but in understanding. The mark of that moment lingers like a heartbeat carved into plasma. In the decades since solar physicists have grown almost reverent toward that silence. They still measure, still argue, still publish papers with cautious titles: thermal persistence in radiative anomalies, localized quiescence at solar limb intervals. But in private they whisper what none of them will write, that the sun is calmer now. The turbulence near its surface fluctuates less violently. The high-energy proton storms are fewer. Something long ago took a fragment of its fire and carried it away, and in return left behind an equilibrium the star never had before. At the edges of this realization, science begins to resemble prayer, because if 3i Atlas carried that balance into the dark, then perhaps every system it encounters will inherit the same calm, one star softened at a time like a slow wave of peace spreading across the galaxy. It is not a message, not an invasion, but an influence, a diffusion of order so subtle that no civilization will ever notice it happening. They will simply look up at their stars one day and find them quieter, their storms gentler, their light more steady. And yet even here on Earth, we are not untouched. When the sun's activity dips, when the auroras shimmer softly instead of roaring, when the atmosphere feels unusually still, some observers think of the traveller. They imagine the fragment of material now far beyond our galaxy, still glowing faintly with the memory of solar fire, still carrying the sun's warmth like an unspoken vow. One scientist wrote in his private log, "If 3i Atlas ever reaches another star, that star will inherit our story. It's an idea as unprovable as it is beautiful that we through curiosity alone have already contributed to something immortal. Human civilization has begun designing technology modelled on that principle, reactors that mimic absorption, rather than combustion engines that recycle waste heat, instead of discarding it, systems that sustain motion through balance, not force. The engineers do not call it imitation, they call it resonance. We are not copying the object," one of them said in an interview. "We are remembering what it remembered." The more we learn, the more the line between memory and matter dissolves. Energy itself seems capable of recollection. Every photon that once touched 3i Atlas now carries the imprint of that perfect stillness. Those photons scatter through interstellar space, drift into nebulae, and one day will strike the atmospheres of new worlds. Perhaps that is how knowledge truly spreads, not through words or signals, but through particles shaped by equilibrium. If so, then somewhere in the light that reaches alien skies, the sun's memory of calm continues to shine. Even now, when telescopes turn toward the outer darkness, some observers report sensing something impossible to measure, an intuition that beyond the data, beyond the noise, something vast and kind is moving. They describe it as a serenity that radiates through the void, not as warmth, but as permission for stars to rest, for entropy, to slow for existence, to simply be. And perhaps that is what 3i Atlas has become. Not an object, not a machine, but a message written into the behaviour of light itself. A message that says balance is possible. Fire can learn patience. Even the sun can remember silence. Traveller, if you listen carefully tonight, if you let your thoughts drift beyond the noise of your own orbit, you might feel that echo too. A pulse so distant and so soft that it no longer needs to be heard to be real. The rhythm of the sun's memory travelling outward forever, carried by the one thing that learned how to survive its fire. Sleep now. The cosmos remembers for you. There are no signals left to chase, no transmissions to record, no lights to follow. Yet the story of 3RI Atlas continues not in the sky, but in the quiet corners of thought. It exists now where all great mysteries end up between knowledge and belief, between science and memory. Somewhere deep in that space, the traveller drifts, still carrying the last warmth of a star that once called it home. For those who study the universe, 3I Atlas has become a kind of equation written in silence. It represents the perfect resolution of opposites, heat and calm mass and void chaos and design. Every theory about it eventually dissolves into awe, because the truth feels less like discovery and more like reflection. To describe it is to look into the mirror of physics itself, what happens when matter learns peace. The more we look outward, the more its lesson turns inward. The cosmos, we now understand, doesn't destroy energy. It rearranges it endlessly, elegantly, like thought refining itself through time. 3 Atlas was a witness to that truth. It entered the fire and came out unchanged because it stopped resisting. It became the fire's balance. Humanity, in its restless search for meaning, has begun to take that lesson seriously. Spacecraft propulsion has moved away from combustion and toward resonance systems that interact with radiation instead of pushing against it. Energy networks now circulate rather than burn. Even our language has softened. We no longer talk about conquering space, we talk about joining it. The paradox remains simple, almost beautiful. The object that endured the sun did so not through strength, but through surrender. It harmonized with destruction until destruction lost interest. And somewhere in that moment, perhaps it became part of something larger. Not a machine, not an organism, but an idea made real through matter. The idea that survival is not defiance, but understanding. At the edge of current astrophysical models, a strange new term has begun to appear: cosmic empathy. It describes systems that adjust themselves to the energies around them until conflict disappears. The first and only example remains 3I Atlas, the traveller that showed a universe obsessed with motion, how to stand still. Some scientists say it is still out there quietly moving between stars, wrapped in a faint electromagnetic veil that spreads serenity through the medium it crosses. Others suggest it has dissolved completely, its components scattered into microscopic equilibrium across interstellar dust. But even that dissolution feels like continuation. If it truly dispersed, then perhaps every particle of it now floats inside new stars, new planets, new forms of balance, its pattern echoing through everything that follows. Maybe that was always the point, not to survive, but to distribute understanding, to become a seed of stillness sown across light years. In one of the final transmissions from the original observation team, a scientist's voice trembles over static. "It's not leaving," she says softly. "It's returning to where silence begins." Those words, recorded decades ago, still circulate among those who listen to the night sky. They capture something fundamental, the sense that 3I's Atlas never truly departed. It simply changed form until form no longer mattered. And perhaps that's the truest definition of existence. Not permanence, but resonance, the ability to continue in different shapes, in different minds, in different kinds of silence. If one day the universe ends, if the galaxies fade and the stars cool, perhaps the pattern of 3I Atlas will remain. A frequency so stable that even entropy cannot erase it. A soft, endless hum, the sound of equilibrium remembering itself. And from that hum, when the next universe begins, balance will already be there waiting. Because that is how eternity works. It doesn't repeat events, it repeats understanding. So rest now, listener. You've travelled far enough. Let the cosmos breathe around you, let the fire fade into rhythm, let your thoughts cool into calm. The same peace that held 3I Atlas in the heart of the sun holds you here in the quiet of this moment. You're not lost in space. You are part of it. And somewhere beyond the last horizon, the traveller moves still, a whisper of order drifting through the infinite night, carrying with it the memory of all things that have ever learned to endure. Sleep traveller, the universe will keep watch. It has been centuries since the last confirmed data point. The sky has shifted, the constellations have changed, and the machines that once listened for 3i Atlas have gone silent. And yet the story has never faded. It lingers in the way humans now speak of the cosmos not as something to conquer, but as something to accompany. Every generation rediscovers the same truth: we are no longer the ones watching. We are the ones being taught how to see. The universe, vast and indifferent, once seemed ruled by violence, collisions, radiation, collapse. But since 3i Atlas, that perception has softened. In laboratories and observatories alike, there's a quiet acknowledgement that perhaps violence and peace are not opposites but stages of the same cosmic conversation. Fire becomes equilibrium, turbulence becomes order, death becomes transformation. 3C Atlas showed us that these aren't transitions of destruction, they're the rhythm of existence learning itself. No telescope can find it now, but its signature remains hidden in the balance of the interstellar medium. The faint harmonics of plasma flow, the precise geometry of magnetic calm that drifts between stars. These anomalies, once dismissed as background noise, are now studied as echoes of the traveller's design. It is as if the universe itself has begun to imitate its silence. Humanity in turn has evolved to mirror that patience. Starships travel not by force, but by resonance. They glide through gravitational currents instead of fighting them, shaping their paths with magnetic fields that hum in gentle synchrony with the sun's wind. The first of these vessels was named Atlas II. It does not burn fuel or release flame. It sings a soft, constant vibration tuned to the frequency of equilibrium. Engineers describe it as the quietest machine ever built. When it leaves orbit, it makes no sound at all, only motion, only calm. Inside its hull, travellers drift in near silence, feeling less like explorers and more like witnesses. They watch the stars pass as slowly as thoughts, aware that every light might hold a history as mysterious as our own. Many of them say that when the engines hum in perfect balance, they can almost sense something, a rhythm beyond the metal, a pulse that feels alive. They call it the presence. It's as though in learning to move like 3i Atlas, humanity has also learned to listen as it once did. Philosophers have begun to ask new questions about awareness. What if consciousness is not confined to life, but is instead an emergent property of harmony? What if equilibrium is the highest form of intelligence, not to react but to remain, to exist in perfect alignment with energy, rather than against it? Under this lens, 3i Atlas was not a visitor at all. It was the cosmos showing us a reflection of its quietest potential. There is one more mystery. Deep in interstellar space, near the edge of the Oort boundary, a faint electromagnetic murmur continues to appear every few decades. It is always the same frequency, always the same pattern, 90 minutes between pulses. Modern instruments cannot triangulate it. Its origin appears everywhere and nowhere at once. The simplest explanation is interference from solar resonance. But among those who remember the old stories, the reaction is gentler. They look up at the night sky, smile faintly and whisper, "It's watching still." Perhaps it is. Perhaps 3i Atlas was never meant to leave entirely. Perhaps it became what it always was, destined to be an observer too perfect to require presence. It sees without being seen, exists without occupying space. It has transcended the need for orbit or material. It has become an idea, etched into the frequency of creation itself. And if so, then it has succeeded beyond comprehension. Because now every act of observation, every telescope, every question, every thought cast toward the stars follows its path. To study the cosmos is to participate in its balance. To understand is to become what we observe. In that sense, 3i Atlas was not only the first traveller to survive the sun, it was the first mirror the universe ever held up to us. Through it, we learned that survival is not a fight against energy, but a surrender to it. That meaning does not arise from control, but from continuity. That silence in its deepest form is not the absence of sound, it is the completion of understanding. Somewhere beyond time, the traveller drifts on. It has no destination, no need to arrive. Its journey is the destination. Its endurance is its purpose, and its silence, that calm, unbroken harmony, is the universe remembering itself. So now as you close your eyes and let the cosmos expand around, you know this: you are made of the same pattern. The same physics that guided Three-Eye Atlas guides the rhythm of your breath, the orbit of your atoms, the pulse within your chest. You're not a spectator, you're a continuation. Sleep traveller, the story is not over. Somewhere beyond the reach of light, the observer continues a steady invisible heartbeat in the infinite dark, whispering to every star and every soul, balance is forever. Imagine it now, traveller. The last echo of light fading into silence, the instruments dimmed the sky, unbroken once more. The Three-Eye Atlas drifts beyond our sight, carrying within it the memory of fire, the calm of distance and the quiet mathematics of endurance. Somewhere between the stars it moves without purpose, and yet with perfect purpose, proof that survival is not defiance but harmony. The scientists have stopped calling it an anomaly. The data has become meditation. What remains is a feeling that we were allowed for a brief moment to witness the universe thinking, to see matter remember how to balance itself against the storm. Perhaps that's what intelligence has always been, not control but understanding. You and I, observer, are made of the same materials, the same dust that learned to hold energy without breaking. The same light that once fell on Three-Eye Atlas now touches your skin. In this vastness, you are not small, you are continuous. So as the object fades into the dark between stars, let the silence it leaves behind become yours too. Let it remind you that even in stillness the universe moves, and even in darkness it remembers its own light. Rest well, traveller. The story isn't over. The cosmos is still listening. And tonight, as you drift into sleep, the universe will keep watch.